Well, here I am, back again, trying to review something. Well, this time it may turn into a bit of a series. I've set myself the insane task of playing through all the limited run PS4 games in release order. This doesn't mean I have to get the platinum trophy on everything, but trust me, I'll try. No, it just means see the credits roll before moving on. I doubt I'll do a separate video for each game, only ones that feel like they deserve it. Any others would just be lumped in as a bit of an update on my progress, with a quick rundown of the game. I will note though, if I have completed the game before, I will play an alternative version, just as a comparison, such as the PS Vita, Switch, Xbox or Steam versions. Why have I decided to do this? Well, I suck at working out what I'm going to play next, and this will give me some focus. Since I've spent a lot of time tracking these games down and a good chunk of change actually acquiring them, if they aren't being played, what was the point in all that? My plan is to also stream at least one session of each of the games. One, just so I can get footage the lazy way, and two, if anyone wants to see what I think of these games there and then, you can come and see me get angry at them in real time. So before we start to talk about the first game, which is Saturday Morning RPG, I'll say one playthrough was beaten entirely on stream, and any subsequent playthroughs and trophy mop-up was done whenever I found the time and I didn't record it. This is one that I actually saw the end of and obtained the platinum trophy, so I will discuss the difficulty of the overall completion towards the end of the video. So with all that said, let's start off by talking briefly about the history of the game and why it's significant to Limited Run's history. Don't worry, this isn't going to be in depth. Although this isn't the first game released by Limited Run Games in physical form, that honour goes to Breach and Clear on the PS Vita. It is, however, their first release for the PlayStation 4. It was developed by Mighty Rabbit Studios, which if you do not know, is the development studio owned by the founder of Limited Run Games, Josh Fairhurst. This game was, however, developed before Breach and Clear, as it started life as an iOS title. It has since been ported to the PS Vita, PS4, Switch, and even the Xbox One. Sadly, the Xbox version is digital only. Even weirder, it was a launch title for the Ouya. Does anybody remember that thing? I didn't want this to be an in-depth history lesson, but I just wanted to make note of its significance to the startup of Limited Run as a company. The story behind this game and Breach and Clear is actually pretty interesting, as without them there wouldn't be a Limited Run Games. So anyway, let's move on. What's this game about? Let's get into the story contained within this nostalgia overload. Unfortunately, I must report there isn't a lot to say here on the story. It centres around a high school kid called Marty, who's given a magical notebook which allows him to use everyday objects as weapons, as he sets out to thwart the plans of the evil Hood. Trust me, with a name like that, most of the stream time was me just making foreskin jokes to myself. Who calls himself the Hood? On a separate note, the notebook he uses is the Trapper Keeper style. I didn't know what one of these was until I looked it up. I've heard of it in American media. It's just what we call a folder over here. Anyway, the game is broken down into 5 episodes, each like a Saturday morning cartoon with a self-contained story. The final episode being a sort of wrap-up to the series, in standard TV fashion. One of the chapters is a Christmas episode. There is the typical friend/love interest in a girl called Samantha, but this seems to get pushed into the background and doesn't really go anywhere for most of the runtime. Even though the plot is quite light, the fun comes from trying to spot all the nostalgic 1980s references, such as Marty having the hoverboard from Back to the Future as his mode of transport. It goes with the name really, doesn't it? I don't know how they were able to get away with that. There's also Transformers knockoffs as allies and villains. You can use NES-style cartridges as weapons, and are even able to slap enemies with a rhinestone glove and moonwalk away. They knew their target audience for the game, and they nailed it with the amount of nostalgic references. There's just too many to list off here. Plus I don't want to spoil them all. Part of the fun of the game is when they just pop up out of nowhere. Even the music evokes memories of old action-packed cartoons. This is all well and good, but unless the game plays well, no one would stick around to see any of these callbacks. So how does the game actually play? The game is played from a top-down perspective, akin to JRPGs of the past, or something like the earlier Zelda games. Although only the character sprites are 2D, the environments are actually 3D models. At first I didn't like the way the game looked, but the longer I played, it just seemed to fit. With a name like Saturday Morning RPG, you might not be surprised to find out that combat plays like a turn-based RPG. You have a standard attack, a weapon attack, and a charge attack. Pretty much everything is useless, including the weapons, unless you've used the charge attack beforehand. You can see down in the bottom left of the screen how powerful your attack is based on the multiplier displayed. The multiplier sadly tops out at 9.9 times, so you can't go too crazy. You do have a few different ways to power up your attacks. This comes in the form of 3 different options. The most effective is the tap a button as fast as you can, but for a whole playthrough this will really start to wear on you. There is a non-interactive charge, which automatically uses a chunk of your energy, but this is nowhere near as effective as mashing the buttons. The third is a gauge-based charge. Here you will need to press the X button when the meter fills up. Again, your multiplier will never go up as much as if you'd just chosen the first option. You also get to enable perks before the fight by rubbing scratch and sniff stickers. The quicker you can rub these, the more you can use in battle. You can have up to 5 equipped at once, but the better the sticker, the longer it takes to scratch. This means if you equip 5 of your best, it's very unlikely you'll have time to activate them all before the battle begins. You scratch these off either by waggling the analog stick or rubbing the PS4 touchpad. On other systems it would just be rubbing a touchscreen. On the PS4 I found that using the stick was way more effective than the touchpad. Whenever an attack is performed, a set of QuickTime events are triggered, similar to that of the Paper Mario games. This means well-timed presses can be used to deal higher damage or to block things when they come your way. If timed perfectly, projectiles can be sent hurtling back at the enemy. These don't just come in the form of timed button presses, sometimes it would trigger a minigame, such as a game of Breakout, which you need to clear before you can hit your target. Some attacks can be strung together too. The best example of this is using the NES cart, which curls you into a Metroid-style morph ball, and you can lay bombs in front of the enemies. You can then couple this with a safety scissors item and drag the enemies across the bombs. Doing this will also trigger a trophy, so just a heads up there. I still think a rope would have made much more sense for this. Luckily, enemy encounters aren't random, and they can be seen on the map at all times. They also do not respawn, so if you want to grind for XP, you'll have to keep replaying the levels rather than finding a good spot to farm. Other modes are available to help grind XP too, but we'll talk about them later on. Each episode length varies, but they're not overly long, ranging from 45 minutes to just over an hour on your first go. These can be slimmed down significantly though, when you've leveled up and know exactly what you're doing. Other than playing through the story mode, what else is there for you to be doing? Well, going for the trophies of course. This involves branching paths, miscellaneous tasks, and playing other game modes. So let's talk about them. The game on PS4 contains 58 trophies, with one of these of course dedicated to that sweet platinum. Luckily, nothing is missable, but if you're just going in blind like I did, you will find yourself with a lot of backtracking. Which isn't too bad as there are trophies tied to levelling up your character. This ends at level 50, but after doing everything else in the game, I was lucky to be anywhere near level 25. This might have been my fault though, as afterwards I realised you could adjust the level of the enemies in the game in the options, and this would have yielded far greater XP rewards, but I imagine it might have also soured my experience of the main story. I enjoyed that by default it's a pretty casual playthrough. Sadly, only 3 trophies are tied to story progression, and these are only for completing a certain number of episodes. A large majority of the rest are for completing side quests, which are all pretty easy, or for completing certain numbers of actions, such as winning a set number of battles or hitting an amount of perfectly timed attacks. Even if you are aware of all the side quests, you cannot knock these out all in one run, as missions have branching paths and decisions, which you will have to try both off to get the relevant trophies. One side quest even has 5 different outcomes, but luckily this is at the beginning of an episode, but it's easy to keep restarting and see all the scenarios. Like any great RPG, there are also hidden bosses. All these have trophies tied to them. Some of these can be super tough, but later in the game, one of the weapons you find is a telephone, and if you ring one of the numbers hidden throughout the game, shh, it's definitely not visible on screen now, you can make yourself invincible as long as you have enough money to stay on the line. Some of the more interesting trophies are the ones tied to finding items later on in the game and using them in earlier chapters. For example, you unlock a Kung Fu headband later in the game. If you go back with this to an earlier chapter and use it on the Karate Kid inspired bully to pull off a crane kick, you will unlock a trophy. There is one tied to playing the game after 11 PM as it's the only time some of the enemies appear. If you cannot do this, luckily you can just change the time on your PS4 system and force them to spawn. Of course there are also collectible based trophies, the worst being collecting all the scratch and sniff stickers. This isn't as simple as just pulling up a guide and following that to find them all, as they're all located in Happy Meal boxes hidden throughout the episodes, but what comes out of these boxes is random. This does mean though that you can find a nice row of boxes and keep restarting a chapter to grind them out, but I would have preferred them to all have been in their own specific boxes. So far, most of these are long but not difficult in the slightest. But here comes the other game modes. The first you should have no issue with. This is the arena battle. You only have to win this once, and it's just a single fight. But this is also most likely where you'll spend most of your time, at the end of the game grinding out level 50, as you can set this fight to have the highest level enemies and reap the rewards quickly. Sadly, you will have to change the difficulty of the enemies every time you do this, as even though the game says it's still on level 50, it's not, and you won't be getting the correct amount of XP. The other mode contains what I believe to be the hardest achievement in the game. You have to survive 15 waves of endless mode. This can be done on the lowest difficulty, but you only gain a little bit of health and magic back after each fight, so it starts to wear you down quickly. The best way I found to do this was to use the scratch and sniff stickers that lower the enemy's health so you can get through them as quickly as possible. I then used the special phone number during the boss battles, which if I remember correctly come up every 5 fights. It still doesn't make it a walk in the park though, as the more you use the phone, the further over your max amount of health you can go, and at one point one of the bosses mirrors you, which includes if you have a ton of health. I also found by then I'd been hit with so many debuffs that I must have spent a good 10 minutes not being able to land a single hit. I could just see my money counting down, and when the phone hung up I was terrified. Luckily though, where I had a lot of health I could tank the final enemy, but it was still only about 50-50 if I could land a hit or not. I also couldn't seem to gain any more magic, well not quickly anyway, so I was just chipping away at their health. The fight with this one enemy went on for close to an hour, as we were both so high on health but could only do single digit damage. It was a close call, but I only just won. If I hadn't, it would have been a while before I attempted this again. It might have actually put me off the platinum. I don't think I even would have been able to get to the end without the phone method. Plus, I didn't want to start grinding the game again for money just to get another shot at it. Even with this though, the platinum isn't too difficult, and with some persistence, anyone could unlock it. But is the game worth your time? Should you pick it up? This is a question that has two answers. Yes, this is most definitely worth a play, and going for the trophies was a good time, but it depends on how you want to play it. I'd give this one a digital recommendation, as if you just want to bump your trophies or gamer score, this will save you a lot of money. But this comes with a catch in PAL territories. If you want it for your collection here in the UK, you're going to have to fork out some change. On eBay, the cheapest copies for the PS4 will set you back around £80. The game shares a trophy list with the Vita version, which is usually a little bit cheaper, but this jumps around like mad. If you want a physical copy, but don't care at all about the digital dopamine hit, then the Switch version can be picked up for about £35. If you're in the States though, you're in luck. These are rather affordable over there, with the PS4 version topping out at about $50, the Vita one being a little bit more expensive, but not much more, and the Switch one being as low as $30. If you think these sound similar in price, a quick conversion will show the PS4 version costing a little over double in the UK compared to the States. The reason for its jump in price here is due to that small catch I mentioned earlier. If you want this as a digital download, it looks like you're going to have a US account, as it doesn't seem to be listed here on the UK PlayStation or Xbox stores, at time of writing anyway. It is available in the Switch eShop though. Well, this goes hand in hand with it being the cheapest version, doesn't it? Okay, maybe it's hard for me to recommend due to these issues, but I did enjoy it. I do plan on putting all these games into a ranking system as I beat them, just so we can find out if the quality of limited run titles has got better, stayed consistent, or just got worse over time. But by default, this currently holds the #1 spot on the ranking. This will also cover a wide genre of games, and by the end of it, we will hopefully have the answer to the age-old question of, is aiming to get a full set of games worth it? Let me know down in the comments if you've played this. What you thought of it? Have you got the Platinum Trophy or 1000G? Or have you gone out your way to pick up a physical copy? Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Just a heads up though, so far what I've played of game number 2, I think it's also going to require a video of its own.